Hello, welcome to my presentation. In my presentation I will talk about a study which we conducted on the research question whether watching fictional TV series improves theory of mind and empathy. I will start my presentation by giving a short overview on the theoretical and empirical background. Then I will turn to the study and finally I will discuss its results and limitations. Now if we turn to the question why we should actually examine a research question like this, we can answer that engaging in fictional narratives, in particular by watching TV series and films, is a very common leisure activity in many societies and cultural groups. The narratives typically contain many characters who interact with each other and who are situated in a web of more or less complex interpersonal relationships, with love and conflict being the most common themes depicted in those narratives. The narratives are also marked by a series of events or plot that happens, and also the inner workings of the characters, which might correspond to their behavior or not. Because of that, many theories assume that engaging in narratives might have beneficial effects on social cognitive skills, such as empathy or theory of mind. Theory of mind refers to the ability to represent one's own and others' mental states, such as desires or beliefs. Empathy, in contrast, refers to the ability to recognize and match others' emotions. As there are different theories, many different mechanisms have been proposed. For example, that we simulate mental processes of the characters involved in the narratives. Here you can see a couple having a conflict, and we might just simulate the inner workings, the feelings, and the thoughts of the man and the woman in the scene. But it's also possible that we learn from observation, that we learn what behaviors can be conducted, and we also learn about the consequences of those behaviors. Of course, it's also possible that we might learn directly social information from those encounters, namely that, for instance, yelling isn't something that is suitable to solve interpersonal conflicts in our culture. But of course, it's also possible that engaging in narratives might result in a priming or so-called resonance effect, which means that the engagement in narratives activates our neural processing and content stored in long-term memory and thus influences subsequent processing and may increase subsequent task performance. The space and framework, which is called the Social Processes and Content Entrained by Narratives framework, comprises many of those explanations and distinguishes between social content and social processes that can be honed by engaging in narratives. For social processes, it's important that the stories represent the social world, that they elicit or invite social processes, and that those social processes are improved by practice. For social content, of course, it is important that the social content is actually accurate, that it is learned and that it is applied to the real world, and then in consequence social processes and social content might be improved. But as you can see here, the space and framework also takes account of potential moderators, which might increase or decrease the effects of engagement in narratives. As moderator variables, narrative processes such as transportation or identification have been proposed. Transportation refers to a convergent process where all mental systems and capacities become focused on events occurring in the narrative, so one is actually absolutely absorbed in the narrative. Identification means that one adopts a character's views, goals and plans as if they were one's own, so one actually completely identifies with a character in the story. Now if we turn to empirical evidence, we have to concede that there aren't many studies targeting TV series or films, and we have to look first at evidence concerning written fictional narratives, and we have two recent meta-analyses here, one for correlation and one for experimental studies. Both point out that there is a small to medium-sized relationship between reading narratives and social cognitive skills. If we turn now to TV series, a recent study has been conducted by Limol et al., in which they showed that consuming eudaimonic TV series correlates positive with social cognitive skills. And eudaimonic refers to TV series that are revealing something about yourself or others and that are moving. And more importantly, two studies that were published in one paper have been conducted by Black and Barnes. In those studies, they showed that watching an excerpt or watching a full episode of fictional TV series resulted in better theory of mind performance than watching non-fiction or watching nothing at all. If we turn now to the question whether it makes sense to examine moderator effects, here we can say that the heterogeneity of effects in experimental studies that was observed in the meta-analysis conducted by Dodelfeder and Tamir indicates that moderator effects are worthwhile examining and should be taken into account. Transportation and identification have been proposed from a theoretical standpoint, but they are also empirically linked to persuasion and personal change through stories. And there's also one study or one paper that comprises two studies in which transportation is linked to higher self-reported empathy after reading a fictional story compared to reading a non-fiction story. Given that theoretical and empirical background, in our study we examined whether watching fictional TV series improves theory of mind and empathy, and here we had a focus on an ecologically valid setting, so that it's not just something which we find in a lab study. Our concrete hypotheses were that participants who watch fictional TV series outperform those who watch documentaries on social cognitive skills, meaning empathy and theory of mind, and that narrative transportation and identification moderate the effect of fictional TV series on social cognitive skills, with stronger transportation and identification increasing the effect of fictional TV series. To examine this question, we recruited a sample via our university's recruiting system. In the end, we had a final sample of 201 participants, which were mostly female in its early 20s and had a high educational level, as shown by around 85% having received a higher education entrance qualification and 12% having already obtained a university degree. As instruments, we used measures that are commonly used in this line of research. For theory of mind, we used a German version of the Reading the Mind in the Eyes test, which was developed by Baron Cohen and colleagues. Here you can see an example picture. Those pictures are presented to the participants. Then they see 4 words describing either mental or emotional states, and they have to select the word that best matches the picture they see. For empathy, transportation, and identification, we use self-report measures. For empathy, it was a German adaptation of the interpersonal reactivity index. For transportation, the transportation scale in its short form. And for identification, we used items from Isberner and colleagues, which were based on a study conducted by Sestier and Green. Now, if we turn to the design and procedure of the study, we have to note first that the study was conducted online using the program SOSI survey. In this study, the participants had first to conduct pre-test on demographics, theory of mind, empathy, and general questions regarding the media consumption. Then they were randomly assigned to one of two conditions. One condition was the fictional TV series condition. Here, participants watched the first 3 episodes of either The Expanse or Dietland. In the other condition, the participants were assigned to one of 2 non-fiction documentaries, and here they watched 3 episodes, either of the Dino Planet or Fascination Universe, which do not contain human interaction. The participants could watch these episodes at their own convenience, self-paced at home, during the next 7 days, and after 7 days they received a link to the post-test in which they had to answer control questions in which we wanted to ensure that they had actually watched the 3 episodes by asking questions about the content, but we also asked whether they had actually watched the series or documentary assigned to them and whether they had watched exactly the 3 episodes, not more and not less. Then we also administered the theory of mind test, the empathy, transportation, identification questionnaires, and also a questionnaire about general media consumption during the study. Now if we turn to the results, we start with hypothesis 1, namely that participants who watch fictional TV series outperform those who watch documentaries on social cognitive skills. We examined this separately for theory of mind and empathy. For theory of mind, we found that the general theory of mind performance increased from pre to post test, but only slightly. But we observed no interaction effect between measurement point and condition, as you can see from the figure, but also from the p-value. We observed a small effect size, and to test whether that effect size could have been reasonably detected in the original study conducted by Black and Barn in the laboratory, we also conducted a test of inferiority, which was non-significant, meaning that our effect size was not significantly smaller than an effect size that could have been detected in the original study conducted by Black and Barnes. For self-reported empathy, as you can see, we observed a significant but small decrease from pre to post test. But again, and importantly, we found no interaction effect between measurement point and condition. That you can see from the figure, but also from the p-value. The effect size was again small, and this time the test of inferiority against an effect size that could have been reasonably detected in the original study conducted by Black and Barnes was significant, meaning that our effect size was significantly smaller than an effect size that could have been reasonably detected in the original lab study. Now if we turn to the second hypothesis, namely that narrative transportation and identification moderate the effect of fictional TV series on social cognitive skills, with stronger transportation identification increasing the effect of fictional TV series. We have to say that for theory of mind, neither identification nor transportation were significant moderators, and the same was observed for self-reported empathy. Neither identification nor transportation were significant moderators of the relationship between experimental condition and social cognitive skills. Turning to a discussion of the results, I first summarize them briefly. We found no statistically significant effect of watching fictional TV series on theory of mind performance and self-reported empathy. For self-reported empathy, we found actually that the effect size found in our study was significantly smaller than an effect size that could reasonably have been observed in the original lab study conducted by Black and Barnes. But we found also no significant moderator effect of identification and transportation. Turning to possible explanations and questions, we have at first to note that there is a difference between our results and the results from Black and Barnes studies. Black and Barnes studies reported medium-sized effects. In our study, we found only small effects that were not statistically significant. One possible explanation is that in Black and Barnes studies, in which the post-test was conducted directly after watching the episode or the excerpt of the episode, in our study that was not the case. And so in Black and Barnes study, that might have resulted in a priming effect, in a temporary increase in social cognitive task performance, which could not be detected in our study because between watching the series or the episode of the series and the post-test, there were several hours or days. Another point that might be argued from a theoretical point of view is that the amount of exposure, although it's much more than in many other studies, is quite small compared to the amount of TV series we watch during our leisure time, during our lifetime. And so the amount of exposure might have been too small to observe any lasting improvements, given that it was not possible to observe any priming or any possible priming effects in our present study. Finally, there are two minor points which might actually also have influenced the results of the present study. The first is that TV series aren't the same, and we didn't use the same TV series as did Black and Barnes, and so it's possible that the TV series that we used, Dietland and The Expanse, might not have been suited to foster social cognitive skills. Another technical point is that in our study we used a highly educated sample that consisted mostly of undergraduate university students, and it's quite possible that those students could not be influenced, could not gain from engaging in those TV series. But it's possible that other samples might actually do so. With that, we are already at the end of the presentation. I want to thank you very much for your attention, and I hope we will have a good time and a good discussion at the online conference. At the end, here just a quick overview over my references.